YouTube. So this is going to be our second video of the melee series. This is melee defensive. Now, melee defensive is not quite as physical contact avoidant as melee passive is, and that's because of the many defensive items that melee defense uses. And so naturally, you're going to get pretty close to the bad guy in order to deploy these items, and as a result, the learning curve is going to be a little bit higher. Mostly in the defensive items itself, just knowing how they work, the ins and out, technical aspects, and methods of deployment. So to start off with, we'll talk about, we'll just go over the cardio. It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same as melee passive. Again, we're not engaging an enemy, for a long duration battle. We're just trying to deploy the item and then get away. Okay, so the training for cardio is the same. It's going to be sprinting. Now, before we talk about the defensive items in question, we do have to consider the viewpoints of the law and just the way the law is gonna look at people who defend themselves. Okay, so not too long ago, the courtroom was a pretty good place to get justice. These days, I would say, not really. Okay, and I think that's mostly because just natural globalization. People with money can buy out judges' decisions and lawyers and things like that, and so naturally the original purpose has been diverted, and so the only people who can really get justice these days is really just rich people. And if that's you, that's great, but it ain't me, and I bet it's not most people. And so naturally, the question is, we don't want to be in a courtroom to begin with, okay, even if it's for self-defense. And I've seen many self-defense cases. Those martial arts lives have been ruined, even though it made no damn sense. And I can only imagine it's because the judge got bought off, or the lawyers got bought off, maybe the jurors got bought off. You never know. That's just the reality of the situation. Okay, so when considering the law's viewpoints, we want to, especially here in melee defensive, we want items that are not dedicated weapon platforms. So for example, a fixed blade, right, a bayonet or whatever, right, that is a dedicated weapon platform. It's supposed to slash and stab specifically for that, right? It's designed that way, the handle and everything. But if you have something like a Swiss Army knife or any kind of folding blade, it's hard for an overzealous lawyer to say that that's an assault weapon. I'm sure they'll try, but it's harder for them to convince the jury of that. You know what I mean? Same thing with the stun gun. The stun gun, they got one where it's kind of like an actual gun and it shoots out like a ranged stun gun. That's a dedicated weapon platform, and I can see some lawyer, being too hyperactive in their talking point, right? But if you have a stun gun flashlight, right, it's a utility item. Yeah, it's a stun gun, it's also a flashlight, right? So basically we want to look at and we want to consider defensive items that are not dedicated platforms, right? And another thing too is that when deploying these items, the question is going to come in, of course, about like either number of slashes or stabs, and then of course how long you stun somebody, right? It's kind of hard to determine what how many is good. Obviously, you stab somebody 10 times and it doesn't look as good, right? But if you stab a bad guy like 2 times, right, assuming that it's over and he or she's not trying to kill you, right? And then with the stun gun too, well, most testing is done about 7 seconds, I think, but I don't think that will, just think about it. Is that really going to hold up in court? Is that going to make you look good, right? You really got to think about how long are you deploying the defensive item. And another thing too with gender is that women can actually get away with a lot more use of the defensive item than a man would. So that means that as a guy, I'm a guy if you didn't know, we cannot use the defensive item as much as a lady would. So if we're using a stun gun and a lady could get away with 7 seconds of shocking somebody, that doesn't mean we can. We're kind of naturally just exposed to more danger. Same thing with a slash or a stab. If a lady fought off an attacker and he was stabbed like 6 times, you know, are we going to get the same result as a man? I would imagine not, right? I think we're probably going to get screwed if we do that. So those are some things for you to consider, before considering purchasing or training defensive items. Is just think about, how is this going to look in a courtroom if you end up in there. Now, of course, we don't want to, but I'm just saying, right? How can we make ourselves look as good as possible besides having a perfect record? So for our first defensive item, we're going to consider the stun gun. Now, stun gun, the term used colloquially, basically it can be an actual stun gun, but it can also be like a stun flashlight as well. So when considering the two, stun gun or stun flashlight, the first thing is that the stun gun, right, it's an actual ranged weapon. I don't know if civilians can get it. I know the cops have it, but it's a ranged weapon, right? It can hit the enemy from a distance. So that's pretty good. That's a pretty good pro, right? Now I don't know too much about them, but I imagine they're only one shot, or even if it's not one shot, well, you have to reload it, right? And unless you practice a lot, like, yeah, you can reload a gun pretty quick. But if we're talking about a stun gun, which is a different device, like, how quick can you really reload that, right? And then think about that. Was it really worth, having to take a shot, miss a shot, then you have to reload the stun gun, right? And with a stun flashlight, there's a couple of things here. First of all, it's not a dedicated weapons platform, so it's not something that an attorney could screw you over with, right? And then also, it doesn't really have a limited number of uses, assuming that the charge is full. If you charge it correctly, you can shock them as long as you want. So that's good too. But on the flip side as well, this is a physical close contact, right? You have to get pretty close to the bad guy. You got to touch him with this, with the stun gun, you don't have to get that close to him. So as you can see, there's going to be pros and cons for both. But as you can see, I bought this one, I bought a stun flashlight. Yes, because it's a flashlight, and so it's pretty hard for a scummy lawyer, to twist that. I'm sure he'll try though, right? And another thing is the deployment. So the deployment for this, it's a little bit much, but honestly, it's not that hard that you could train. First of all, there's actually a power switch on the bottom. Okay, the power switch on the bottom is what activates the stun flashlight in question. Even with that off, it works like a regular flashlight. It's got a middle setting, which is its off setting. Then if you push it forward, it's going to do, I think it's highlight, and then you go back and then you push forward and it's low light, and then you got the strobe. So that's kind of nice. I wouldn't say that this will replace my melee passive Lux Pro flashlight. This one's 120 lumens, so it's barely good enough, but it's nice. It's got utility. It can do more than one thing. Now, in terms of the stun gun itself, so the power switch, you want to turn that on, and then you want to push the switch that's in the middle backwards. So it's towards me, right? And then the button on the bottom here is what you press. So that is how that works. Stun gun, but really flashlight. And when we're considering, the different kinds of stun guns, you're going to see different voltage, things like that. That's all generally marketing. Okay, they're going to say it's 1,000,000 volts, 30,000 volts, whatever. The thing is that according to Sabre, microcoulomb is actually the most important thing in determining stun gun effectiveness. And the microcoulomb, the ranges I've seen is 0.5 to, I think, 1.5. And so 0.5 is kind of like not really much. The bad guy won't really feel that much, I guess. And then 1 microcoulomb it's pretty good. The person would be feeling noticeable pain. And then 1.5 microcoulomb is unbearable pain. Now this flashlight, this is a Sabre S2000 SF, and this stun gun is actually, I think it was 1.82 microcoulomb. Now, I didn't want that much to begin with. That actually sounds too much to me. But the reason I ended up with this one is because the other one I looked at, which is kind of what I wanted, it was 1.1 microcoulomb, and I thought that's pretty good. But then the problem was that it was only 80 lumens on the flashlight, so it's not very strong, not very bright. And this one was 120. And then I thought, well, you know, if a lawyer tried to be shady and went like, oh, 80 lumens, nobody really, that's not really useful to most people. The dumb things lawyers say. And so I thought, well, I'll just go up to 120, I guess. And that's why I ended up buying this one. So don't be fooled by 1 million volts or something like that. It's the microcoulomb that's the most important. Now, I haven't really seen too many other companies admit what their microcoulomb rating is. It seems to be Sabre does, though. Sabre is more than happy to tell what their microcoulomb rating is. But yeah, don't get too hung up on how many volts a stun gun has. It's really the microcoulomb you want to look at. Now, another thing to talk about is, at least in regards to stun gun flashlight or something you have to get close to the enemy, um, if you hear that sound and that sparks and all that stuff when you're shocking the enemy, that's actually not good because it means that the energy is not being delivered perfectly into the bad guy. So if you're doing that and you shock them, right? So you shock them, but then you hear that lights, that sound, the lights, it's not being used to its effectiveness. I would just start over. So, once you shock them a little bit, start over and then, get them again, but this time hopefully it won't be as loud and it won't be as bright shining lights. Okay, there should really be very little to no sound or lights. Now the next self-defense item to talk about is pepper spray or pepper gel. Well, I guess it's pepper spray in gel form. That I don't have. Now, by the way, just because I don't have a defensive item, or if I do have a defensive item, that doesn't mean that that's a recommendation or that I think it's good. It's just that's the arts that work for me. The blinding flashlight for melee passive works for me. A folding blade Swiss knife works for me. The stun gun flashlight works for me. That I'm not saying that you should get that. It's just in my experience, my training, and my understanding, I feel like those items fit me well, and that's why I choose them. So don't think that because I don't have a pepper spray, it doesn't work. No, it works. It's just like any other martial art, you have to know everything about it. Okay? So, the pepper spray. Well, the first thing to know is that the pepper spray comes in a spray form or a gel form, and there are pros and cons to each. So let's talk about the pepper spray first. The pepper spray has a very good AoE, area of effectiveness. There's not really too much you have to do for aiming. I mean, aim at the enemy, of course, right? But other than that, it's pretty straightforward, okay? Now, a con of the pepper spray is that, at least when I was in Armored Car, we had a pepper spray that I believe the cops used. We were authorized to use what the cops used, and it was so powerful that even if you aimed it at the bad guy, it would like fill the room, and everyone behind you would probably get affected by it as well. So the AoE is kind of like a positive and a negative, or a double-edged sword. Now, there was actually oh, I went to like a house party yesterday. there was a girl there. She actually said she had pepper spray, and again, this is not an art I'm familiar with. I kind of looked at it and I was like, oh yeah, that's probably it, you know. And she was saying that it left a blue mark on the person that she would use it on. And I remember that in Armored Car that we had the same thing, but I think it was red or orange. And the difference is, I'm going to assume civilians can't get the red or orange, was that um, if a bad guy came into the hospital and he had the red or orange paint, that meant that it was police officers. I mean, obviously, I'm not a police officer, but we were authorized to use their pepper spray. It meant that that person got pepper sprayed by a police officer. So I kind of let the hospital staff know, like, yo, this is not an innocent guy, So call the cops and get him here. Um, but yes, the marking, the paint helps. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's paint. The marking helps. I mean, it will show that, yeah, somebody was attacked, and of course you got to sort that all out. Um, But that's pretty interesting, you know. And I don't know if she trains with that a lot. That's another thing too. How do you really train with that? You know, I mean, yeah, you know how to use it and you understand it. That's true, you know. But I'm very kind of like a hands-on person. If I have a martial art, I really need to have it in my hand. You know, I need to use it. You know, it's not enough to have it in my hand to be like, I don't know how to use it. You know, like, and that's what I felt too when I was in the armored car, was that he just told me how to use the pepper spray, and I was like, I need to use it though. You know, like I don't know. It's like it's not real to me unless I use the actual, you know, the actual martial art. But pepper spray, yes, that's an option. Maybe it's a popular option. I'm not sure. Uh, you know, it's something that you can certainly consider. But just me, it's not really for me. Now, some negatives to consider is that the pepper spray can have blowback. You know, so if it's like a windy day or something, or you're not in line with the winds, there is a good chance that the pepper spray can blow back on you, which means you get the effects of it depending on which one you got, you know, coughing, wheezing, or, you know, hard to see type of thing. So that is something to consider, is that, you know, it can work against you in certain situations. Another thing too is that I remember in my armored car training with the pepper spray that if I used it, that there would be a document I'd have to sign, and this document was worded so beautifully. It was like this: you sign a document that said you released a chemical agent in a public space. Oh my goodness! You know how that sounds in a courtroom? That's insane. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but some pepper sprays are literally just food, right? Like it's literally just capsicum or really, really spicy food. And I thought, well, if somebody uses that, would they have to sign that form as well? Because food's not a chemical agent as far as I'm concerned, you know? And I thought, interesting. Not interesting enough for me to buy it. But you know, I just thought like, okay, so they want us to sign this document for a chemical agent. And that's the thing too, is that pepper spray will have different formulas. And so, you know, I don't know if you can avoid that, but if so, then I would literally just stick with kind of the food type of pepper spray rather than, you know, oh, it has this chemical and that chemical to make people, you know, cough and wheeze. You know, maybe just stick with the food, because I don't know, they were gonna make us sign it if I used the pepper spray. So if you're just a normal civilian, I don't know, I would assume they'd make you sign that document as well. Now the pepper spray in gel form, um, this is typically more expensive than the pepper spray, and but you know there's a reason for that. One is that there's really shouldn't be any blowback. It's literally just a gel form, you know, and so there's really no fear of blowback. Another thing too is kind of like the aiming. You know, the aiming might be a little bit bad because you don't know where to aim. There's no sights on it. But honestly, once you like use it for a few and you see where it's hitting, it's not that hard for you to just change up to the person's eyes. So you know, the accuracy really isn't a con. I mean, I guess it's a con. You don't know where to hit, but honestly, once you get going, you'll know to readjust. And then another thing, and I don't know if this is true or not, is that I imagine you don't have to sign that document because you know pepper spray, pepper gel. Well, I don't know. I guess if the gel has those chemicals that make people nauseous or whatever, maybe you do. But you know, as far as I can tell, I mean, why would you I mean, it wasn't really released in the public space though, because it was just a gel, and you went and you only got the bad guy, right? Because the pepper spray, you got like everybody around you, but the gel, you only get the bad guy. So it's like, okay, so even if it's you were released a chemical agent in a public space, no, I think it will. You know, scumbag lawyers. No, never mind. Damn. I guess you're still subject to that document. Now, last but not least, we have to talk about folding blades. Um, Now, unlike a fixed blade, which would be more melee active, of course, the folding blade is typically a utility knife. You know, it's just a general knife that's there for, you know, opening mail or cutting oranges is what I use mine for. You know, it's just a utility thing, and it's not a big deal. Okay. Granted, I think getting more of a Swiss Army knife, something that has more than just the knife itself in terms of utility, would help in the courtroom if you end up there. Of course, we don't want to, but you never know. Um, you know, just because of the all the different kinds of things you have in here. You know, Phillips screwdriver. There you go. See, so it's got all different kinds of things here. It even has like a little. Yeah, a little grabby, grabby, little grabby, grabby. And then it's got a toothpick as well. So, something like this is going to be pretty hard, I think, for a lawyer to convince a jury that you're trying to commit assault with an assault weapon. So that's kind of nice too. It's just having something that has more than one purpose makes it more difficult for the lawyer to, you know, portray you as somebody looking for a fight or some garbage like that, right? Um, Now with the Swiss Army knife too, this is a Victorinox. This is the one that I got. This comes in different sizes and different tools. But let me tell you, I've seen some pretty funny stuff. There was one where it was literally like a hamburger. Like it was just like this, but it was the size of a hamburger and it had everything. Yeah, it had everything. But it was ginormous. Like you could never carry that normally with you every day unless it was going to be in your home the whole time. Oh yeah, I guess that's fine. A little weird though, but that's fine. But typically a defensive item needs to be on you. You're not going to carry this hamburger with you wherever you go, even if it does have all the cool tools in it, right? And I think the term for that is called program compliance. That means that, how often are you carrying the item with you? There's a point where, especially with firearms, some people get really big guns. And the reason why is because of the weight, the recoil is not that much. And it's good. It's good. They think it's good. And it's good for them. And it is for the range, but you're not carrying something like that with you all the time. You know what I mean? Just look at you know, just look at a samurai. It's like, yeah, this is very good to shoot. I like shooting this, and the recoil is like nothing, but I'm not carrying this on my hip all day, right? Right? It's gonna be something more, smaller, less weight, and more, more tact type of thing. And it's the same thing, when you have a folding blade, if you're gonna get the Swiss Army knife, you don't want something that's about as thick as a hamburger. You're not gonna carry that with you, right? But something like this, you can carry with you all the time. In many cases, I even forgot I have it with me. Well, that's all the items I have for melee defensive. I'm sure I missed something. I can't know everything, but if I miss something, you let me know, won't you? I'm happy to revisit anything, But these are the items that came to mind when I was thinking, okay, so categorizing melee combat into passive, defensive, and offensive. Um, these three are what came to mind for me was the pepper spray, a folding knife, and then some form of a stun gun. And like I said, most of the learning curve comes from just knowing your defensive item and how it's deployed. Um, that's really all that it is. There is no unarmed combat here. There's no martial arts here, though there will be in the next one, of course. Um, so I hope you guys look forward to that. I hope this information was helpful to you. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.